Welcome to EchoShade, where history whispers its darkest secrets and forgotten stories.
History remembers kings by their wars, their crowns, and their cruelty. But sometimes, a story survives only in whispers, a name carried by candlelight through forgotten halls. That name was Blanche of Bourbon. Born in the winter of 1339, in the frost-laced courts of France, Blanche came into the world as a promise forged not from love, but from ink and alliance. Her father, Peter, Duke of Bourbon, and her mother, Isabella of Valois, belonged to a family that breathed diplomacy. Their bloodline was the bridge between thrones. Blanche's destiny was written before she learned to write her own name. In her childhood, she walked through marble corridors filled with secrets. She was taught to smile with restraint, to speak in riddles, and to bow only to the greater game, the politics of crowns. Even as a child, she understood one thing: a princess was not born to live. She was born to be given away. In 1351, when Blanche was just 12, messengers from Castile arrived in the French court. They came with jewels, scrolls, and a royal proposal. Their king, Peter of Castile, young, fierce, unpredictable, wanted a French bride to secure his throne. France, weary from wars and rivalries, agreed. It was a marriage meant to tie two nations together. But behind that agreement lay a web of deceit, for Peter's heart already belonged elsewhere. Her name was Maria de Padilla, a woman of haunting beauty, with eyes that could command kings and damn queens. She was not of royal birth, but she held Peter in a grip stronger than any crown. When Peter heard of his arranged marriage to Blanche, he laughed. He cursed the alliance, but he could not defy the church, nor the pressure of his nobles. So he accepted, in name only. And Blanche, innocent, gentle, obedient, prepared herself to leave everything she knew behind. The journey to Castile took weeks. Through snow-choked passes and wind-swept valleys, Blanche's carriage rolled south toward her fate. She kept a diary then, pages that still exist in fragments smudged by tears and candle wax. "They say he is handsome," she wrote. "They say he is cruel. If I must belong to him, may he at least see me." She arrived in Valladolid beneath the bells of April. The air smelled of orange blossoms and dust. Castile was a kingdom of fire and faith, a land of swords and secrets, ruled by a man whose temper was legend. Peter met her only once before their wedding. He looked at her as one might look at a statue. Beautiful, distant, lifeless. Blanche tried to speak, but his silence was sharper than any insult. The next day, beneath the golden vaults of the cathedral, they were wed. The people cheered. The priests sang. The banners of France and Castile entwined like serpents above them. But in the candlelight, Peter's gaze never softened. His mind was elsewhere, with Maria. That night, Blanche waited. Hours passed. The moon fell across her wedding chamber like spilled silver, but the door never opened. By morning, Peter was gone. He had ridden away with Maria de Padilla, leaving his new queen alone in a foreign land. When Blanche asked for him, his courtiers averted their eyes. When she pleaded for an audience, they told her the king was unwell. Days became weeks. The silence around her grew thick and merciless. Finally, a messenger arrived, not from Peter, but from his guards. Blanche was to be taken for her safety to the fortress of Arevalo. No explanation, no escort of dignity. Just a handful of soldiers who would not meet her gaze. The walls of Arevalo were damp and ancient. Its corridors echoed with the cries of forgotten prisoners. There, the Queen of Castile became a ghost long before her death. She wrote to her family in France, but the letters never reached them. They were intercepted, burned, or rewritten by the king's command. The servants were forbidden to speak her name. She ate alone. She prayed alone. She aged in silence. Meanwhile, rumors spread like wildfire through Castile. Some said the queen had angered the king by refusing his mistress. Others claimed she had cursed him in French, that her words had brought plague and drought upon the land. The superstitious began to call her La Reina Maldita, the cursed queen, but others quietly began to pity her. A few loyal women in the court smuggled food and letters to her cell. One of them wrote later in her own account, "Her Majesty never wept before us. But when she prayed, we could hear her heart break." For 3 years, Blanche remained imprisoned. France sent envoys demanding proof of her well-being. Peter relented. Once, he allowed them to see her. But when they entered the cold chamber, they found a woman unrecognizable. Her hair had turned white. Her skin was translucent. Her voice trembled when she tried to speak. "Tell them," she whispered, "I am not dead yet." The envoys left horrified. But by the time they returned to France, a royal message had already reached Paris, declaring that Queen Blanche of Castile had died suddenly of illness. No cause, no witness, no burial details, only a date and a silence that reeked of lies. A funeral was held in Valladolid. The coffin was paraded through the streets, draped in white silk and perfumed with incense. The people wept for a queen they never knew, but those who watched closely said the procession was strange. The coffin seemed lighter than it should have been. The pallbearers moved uneasily, their eyes darting toward the cathedral doors. And among the crowd, someone saw her. A figure dressed in white, veiled, motionless, standing at the edge of the square. The same face, the same eyes, the same queen. She watched her own funeral until the last bell faded. Then she turned the corner and vanished. For decades, the tale was buried under royal shame. Official chronicles called her death a misfortune. Church records omitted her entirely. Peter married Maria openly and erased Blanche's name from his court, but whispers endured. Travelers claimed that in the ruins of Arevalo, a woman's voice could still be heard at night, reciting French prayers, pleading for light. In France, Blanche's brother vowed vengeance. He accused Peter of murder. War broke out between their nations. But even after Peter himself was slain years later, Blanche's body was never found. Her tomb in Valladolid remained sealed, but when it was opened centuries later, it was empty. Only a veil lay inside, folded neatly as if by her own hand. There is no record of Blanche after 1361, no witness to her final breath, no monument that truly holds her, and yet in both Spain and France, 2 graves bear her name. 2 epitaphs written in different tongues. 2 funerals for one queen. One says she died in sorrow. The other says she escaped in silence. But somewhere between the lines of history, there is a truth that refuses to die. That a queen's body may be hidden, but her soul cannot be erased. Because sometimes the dead do not rest until the world remembers who buried them. Spain declared her dead, but the earth never received her. For years after Queen Blanche's funeral, the royal court of Castile walked like men carrying a secret too heavy for their souls. They spoke her name only in confession, never in daylight. Because every man who had stood by King Peter's side that spring felt the same cold breath in his dreams, a woman's voice whispering from behind stone walls. "You buried a lie." The official tale was brief and elegant, as all lies are. Queen Blanche of Bourbon, it said, had succumbed to a fever in the fortress of Medina Sidonia. Her body was laid to rest with dignity, and her soul commended to God. But the servants who lived in the fortress remembered the smell of burning oil that night. They remembered the king's men riding in silence, their torches unlit. And they remembered the screams, muffled, short-lived, ending with the echo of a door slamming shut. After that, her room was sealed. Her clothes, her letters, her combs, even her rosary, taken away, destroyed. Only a few strands of her white hair remained, caught in the hinge of her cell. In France, news of her death came as thunder. Her cousin, Louis of Bourbon, refused to believe it. He demanded her body be returned for burial in France, as custom allowed for queens of French blood. But Spain never replied. Every envoy sent to Castile either vanished or returned home with stories that didn't match. One said the queen had died of poison. Another swore she'd been strangled. A third whispered that the coffin carried out of Medina Sidonia was empty. When the French king himself wrote to Peter demanding proof, the Castilian reply came stamped with a royal seal. But the wax smelled faintly of roses and ash, as though someone had sealed it beside a fire. Inside there was no explanation. Only 3 words: La reina descansa. The queen rests, but she did not rest. In the years that followed, the people of Castile began to tell stories of a woman seen wandering near the fortress walls dressed in white, her hands clasped as if in prayer. They said she walked at dusk, when the light turned gold and cruel, that she left no footprints in the dust, that her face was pale as marble, and yet her eyes still wept. Farmers passing by after sundown claimed they heard her humming old French hymns. Travelers who dared to camp near the ruins spoke of whispers circling their tents, soft at first, then clearer. He never loved me. The church called it superstition. The crown called it treason. But the people began leaving flowers at the old gate, where the queen's ghost was said to appear. They called her La Dama Blanca, the White Lady, the queen who would not die. In 1363, something strange happened in the Royal Archive of Toledo. A scribe tasked with copying the king's lineage stopped mid-sentence, his quill frozen above the parchment. Under the entry for Blanche, Queen of Castile, he hesitated, then wrote, "Buried in Valladolid." Possibly. That single word, possibly, would haunt historians for centuries, because 50 years later, a monk in a French abbey, cataloging royal correspondences, found a sealed letter written in Blanche's own hand. It was dated 2 months after her supposed death. To my cousin, Louis of Bourbon. I am hidden from the world but not from God. The walls that imprison me are not eternal. Remember me not as dead, but as silenced. If the letter was genuine, then the Queen of Castile lived long after her funeral. The archives of France and Spain tell 2 different deaths. The Spanish record says 1361. The French one says 1364. But the most chilling detail is this. Both kingdoms claim to have buried her. 2 tombs. 2 queens. 1 name. In the Cathedral of Valladolid, a marble sarcophagus bears the royal crest of Castile. In Bourbon-l'Archambault, an unmarked stone slab in a convent crypt holds a similar crest, carved by a trembling hand. When archaeologists examined the Castilian tomb in the 1800s, they found nothing but a folded silk veil and the faint scent of rosewater. When they opened the French one, they found a woman's skeleton, small, delicate, with a fractured wrist, as if she'd fought her way free before the end. Beside her skull lay a ring, engraved with the letters B.P. Blanca de P. Blanche of Bourbon. Some historians dismissed it as coincidence. Others called it divine irony. But the villagers of Bourbon had another explanation. They said a veiled woman had arrived at the convent in the spring of 1361, seeking sanctuary. She spoke softly, carried no name, and spent her days praying in silence before the Virgin statue. They called her Sister Beatrix. No one ever saw her face clearly. One winter, the convent burned to the ground. All the sisters perished, except one body was never found. Years later, the hidden tomb appeared, sealed behind the altar. It bore no date, only one line. Rest, Queen of the North. As centuries passed, her name slipped through the cracks of memory. King Peter's lovers and wars filled the chronicles instead. But wherever her story faded, odd coincidences followed. In the chapel of Medina Sidonia, candles refused to stay lit. Portraits of Peter's new queen blackened at the edges, as if burned by unseen fire. And every November, the month of Blanche's supposed death, the chapel bell tolled 13 times at midnight. Though no one touched it, priests tried to bless the ground, but the air stayed cold no matter how many prayers were whispered. 300 years later, during a royal restoration, a mason repairing the old fortress wall discovered a hollow behind a stone. Inside, wrapped in decayed linen, was a fragment of parchment written in Old French. Barely legible, it read, "If my name be forgotten, let my shadow remain." The king ordered the find destroyed. But one copy survived in a scholar's private notes, passed secretly from historian to historian. By the 19th century, writers began to resurrect her legend, a ghost queen buried in two lands. Her story erased by love and power. Some even claimed that portraits of Maria de Padilla bear traces of Blanche's likeness, as if the painter's memory betrayed him. In the Royal Gallery of Seville, underneath the varnish of Maria's portrait, X-ray scans revealed a hidden image, a second face, faint, sorrowful, the outline of a crown erased beneath another woman's smile. Historians call such tales romantic myth. But the pattern is unsettling. 2 tombs, 2 burials, 2 nations insisting they buried the same queen. And in both, the body that lies beneath never fully rests. In France, the convent crypt grows colder each year, though no window remains. In Spain, the royal tomb of Valladolid still emits the faint fragrance of roses, fresh, even now. No living queen in Castile ever used that scent again. When modern scholars tried to piece the truth together, they found that all of Blanche's letters had been deliberately removed from royal archives. The few that survived were found only because they were misfiled under her mother's name. One in particular stands out. It was addressed not to France, but to the Pope. Holy Father, I have sinned only in obedience. My husband's wrath is my sentence. Pray for my release, not of life, but of remembrance. It ends with a single line written in trembling ink. I live, but not as myself. The mystery of Blanche of Bourbon isn't just about a vanished queen. It's about the erasure of a woman who was never allowed to exist beyond her title, a bride who became a prisoner, a queen who became a ghost, and a ghost who became a myth. But myths, Mayo, have a way of finding their way back, because in 1902, During restoration of the Bourbon family vault, workers uncovered something extraordinary, a narrow staircase behind the tomb wall. At its end was a hidden chamber. Inside it lay a coffin, small, elegant, sealed with 2 wax crests, one of France, one of Castile. When they opened it, they found nothing but dust and a single white glove. Yet the air smelled of roses, the same scent found centuries earlier in the empty tomb of Valladolid. 2 graves. No body, 1 fragrance. To some, it's coincidence. To others, proof that Blanche's spirit divided itself, half in the land that betrayed her, half in the land that mourned her. A queen buried twice so that history could never find her. And perhaps that was her final revenge. To live forever as a question, an echo that keeps kings awake in their sleep. For in Castile they still say, when the night wind passes through the fortress gates, you can hear the faint rustle of silk and a voice, soft but certain, whispering, "He never loved me, but history will." The year was 1902. Europe stood at the edge of a new century, modern, rational, proud. But deep beneath the marble churches of Spain and France, the past refused to stay buried. In Valladolid, renovation work had begun inside the royal chapel. The Bourbon Society had petitioned the crown to restore forgotten royal tombs. Among them lay a name barely remembered, Blanche de Bourbon, Queen of Castile, wife of Peter the Cruel, the queen who vanished. Most historians called her a footnote, others a myth. But when the restorers lifted the heavy slab of her supposed coffin, they found something that silenced the entire chamber. No bones. No remains. Just a veil, perfectly folded, its thread still white after more than 500 years. And beneath it, pressed against the coffin floor, a thin layer of dried petals. Roses. The air inside smelled sweet, warm, alive. But roses do not grow in tombs. At first, the scholars dismissed it as coincidence, a symbolic gesture by whoever sealed the coffin. But one man, Dr. Mateo Sanz, a historian from Seville, felt something else. He wrote in his private notes, "The scent was not of death, but of presence. It filled the air as if someone had just left." He took a sample of the cloth for analysis. The laboratory results were impossible. The fibers were of silk native to France, dyed with a pigment that ceased production in the 1300s. Authentic, untouched. So whose body had been buried? Where had it gone? When Sanz compared the tomb records, he discovered something stranger still. The coffin had been opened once before, in 1789, and resealed without documentation. The same year the French Revolution began. The archivists had left no note, but one page in a Bourbon family journal read, "The Queen's rest disturbed. The veil remains. The rose endures." Meanwhile, in France, across the centuries-old convent of Bourbon-l'Archambault, the abbey caretakers had uncovered an unmarked crypt while clearing flood damage. Inside, a stone sarcophagus, no name, no date, but carved with the faint emblem of Castile. When they lifted the lid, they found a skeleton shrouded in remnants of silk. The skull tilted slightly as though listening, and in the dust beside it, a ring engraved with 2 entwined letters, B and P Bourbon and Peter, or Blanche and Peter. The French government called in experts from the Sorbonne. The bones were examined, catalogued, and carbon dated. Estimated death, mid-14th century. Age, early 20s. Fractures, neck, wrist, ribs, consistent with strangulation. And yet, there was something the scientists couldn't explain. The silk threads of her gown were preserved in a way impossible without air or decay, as though time itself had forgotten to touch her. One of the researchers, Claire Moreau, kept the ring as evidence in a sealed box. Within a week, she fell ill. Fever, insomnia, then silence. Her last recorded words, written shakily in her lab notes, were, "I hear her walking." Rumors spread quickly. Church officials intervened, sealing the crypt again. But the story had escaped. Newspapers across Europe printed headlines like, "The Queen Who Would Not Die," and "France and Spain both claim to hold the same ghost." Academics divided. Some called it folklore, others a royal cover-up to hide Peter's brutality. Yet in the shadows of both nations, two facts refused to vanish. The scent of roses was detected in both tombs, and both were empty by the time modern researchers revisited them. In 1973, a Spanish documentary crew gained access to Medina Sidonia Fortress. They wanted to film the supposed prison where Blanche had been held. Their equipment was simple: cameras, lights, a reel recorder. During filming, one of the microphones captured something faint. A low hum like wind, then a whisper. A voice, speaking Old French. When translated, the words were, "I forgive him," but not his name. The audio engineer resigned the same night. The recording was confiscated by church authorities, and the crew swore never to speak of it again. But a single frame from their footage survives, a white blur passing behind an open door, just as the camera pans across Blanche's cell. Chaftihi. Examined decades later, the motion matched no shadow, no trick of light, no human movement. By the early 2000s, interest in Blanche of Bourbon had grown again. The internet turned her into a digital legend: the vanished queen, the two-tomb bride, the ghost of Castile. But among historians, the question remained painfully human. Did Blanche truly die in that cell? Or was her death an invention of a king desperate to erase her? Dr. Elena Ruiz, an archaeologist at the University of Salamanca, decided to investigate. Her team received permission to reopen both tombs, the one in Valladolid and the one in France, under a joint European historical program. They began with France. Using ground-penetrating radar, they discovered a narrow passage beneath the abbey crypt, one that hadn't appeared on any architectural plans. At its end lay a small chamber filled with dust, and within it, an iron box sealed shut with wax. Inside, letters, 22 of them, folded and pressed flat, all addressed to the same name, Mon cher cousin Louis. Each letter was written in Blanche's hand, each dated after her death. And the final one bore no signature, only a red smudge of wax shaped like a tear. In the margins of the last page, faint and almost erased, were 4 words: "They buried me twice." The discovery shattered decades of historical certainty. If authentic, it proved that Blanche survived her imprisonment, and that both nations conspired to hide her fate. But the deeper Dr. Ruiz dug, the stranger it became. In the Spanish archives, she uncovered an unmarked entry from the reign of King Peter's successor. Funds allocated to maintain the Queen's silence. The French must believe she sleeps. A payment record followed, signed by the King's treasurer, and beneath it, a symbol resembling a rose carved through the parchment. As word of the investigation spread, pilgrims began visiting both tombs again. They brought candles, flowers, poems in French and Spanish. Some claimed that at dawn, they saw mist rise from the earth in the shape of a woman. Others said the scent of roses followed them home. When asked what they believed, Dr. Ruiz said only, "History lies, but bones remember." A month later, she vanished. Her car was found near the fortress of Medina Sidonia, keys still in the ignition. Inside her research journal, one final entry: "The Queen wants to be found." What followed became known as the Silence of Castile. All access to Blanche's tombs was restricted. The French abbey sealed the crypt permanently, and the Spanish government locked the royal archives. Yet some whisper that her remains were moved to an unknown location, a neutral ground between both nations, a third tomb, a secret burial so neither country could claim her ghost. And somewhere, beneath an unnamed chapel in the Pyrenees, a grave marker bears no name, only a symbol, a single rose carved into marble, its stem cut short. Today, historians still argue over her truth. Was Blanche of Bourbon murdered by her husband? Did she escape and live as a nun in France? Or does her body lie in neither tomb, forever divided between two worlds, between vengeance and forgiveness? But there's one detail they cannot explain. In both cathedrals, beneath layers of dust and incense, a faint fragrance lingers still. Roses, impossible to erase. And when the bells toll at midnight, some swear they hear footsteps across the marble. Slow, steady, unhurried. As if a woman in white still walks among her graves, searching for the one where she truly belongs, because history buried her twice. But truth, like her spirit, refuses to stay in the ground. And perhaps the cruelest curse of all was not her death, but her erasure. A queen erased from her kingdom, a name erased from her bloodline, and a love erased by fear. Yet every century, someone finds her again, in dust, in letters, in silence, and every time, the roses bloom anew. It began with silence, a silence older than any kingdom, older than the language that named her. And when it ended, the world realized that a queen erased by history can still whisper through time, the unmarked grave. The year was 2017. A winter storm had buried the Pyrenees under white silence. High above the border between France and Spain, a small chapel stood alone, Capilla del Silencio. It wasn't on maps, no tourists, no parish records, only the sound of wind pressing against old stone. Inside, Father Adrien Dumas tended the altar. He was the chapel's only keeper, a man of quiet faith and long memory. For decades, he'd guarded something beneath the floor, a secret older than his vows. That evening, as the storm raged, a group of historians arrived unannounced. Dr. Lucia Serrano, a former student of the vanished Dr. Elena Ruiz, led them. They carried a folder of restricted documents, copies of letters, payment records, and one faded map. They believed they had found what Ruiz had been searching for, Blanche's true resting place. Father Adrien watched them in silence. When they told him the Queen's name, he simply turned, walked toward the altar, and pressed his palm against the floor. The stone shifted. Dust rose like breath. Beneath it, a stairway, cold, narrow, winding into darkness. "She has waited long enough," he said, too. The chamber beneath, the tunnel descended into the mountain's heart. The air was heavy, sweet, that familiar fragrance. Roses. At the end stood an iron door sealed by wax. On it, faintly etched, A single emblem, a rose with its stem broken in two. Dr. Serrano's hands trembled as she peeled the seal. The wax cracked like bone. The door opened with a sigh, and the light from their lanterns fell upon a room carved from rock. At its center, a stone sarcophagus stood, unmarked, untouched. And beside it, a table. Upon the table, a single object, a crown. Small, delicate, made of beaten silver and thorns. Lucia whispered, "It's her." She brushed the dust from the lid. Inscribed beneath layers of age were 4 words in Latin, non sum mortua bis. I did not die twice. 3. The letters of forgiveness. Inside the sarcophagus lay a woman's form. Her bones were wrapped in silk, a faint shimmer like moonlight. Across her chest, a bundle of letters tied with faded ribbon. Lucia lifted them carefully. The wax seals bore the crest of Castile, but unlike the earlier letters, these were not written to anyone. They were confessions, prayers, and one final farewell. The last page read, "If they must bury me again, let it be between the lands of my birth and my death. Let neither king nor country claim me, for I belong only to the silence that remembers my name." It was signed simply, Blanche. The team stood in silence. No one spoke. No one dared to. Outside, the wind howled against the chapel walls, as though the mountain itself was exhaling. Then, a faint sound, the clink of metal. The crown on the table began to tremble. The thorns shivered. A single petal, white as bone, drifted from the air and landed upon Blanche's chest. Dr. Serrano's voice broke into a whisper. "She forgives him." The last vision. They recorded everything. Photographs, samples, notes. But when they checked the footage the next morning, every frame beyond the threshold of the chamber was black. Every microphone recorded only a heartbeat, steady, rhythmic, human. Lucia's watch had stopped at 12:07 a.m., the same minute Queen Blanche's recorded time of death centuries ago. As dawn broke, Father Adrian led them to the chapel's door. "You must leave her," he said. "The dead do not need proof." They sealed the stairway again, placing the broken rose emblem upon the stone. The documents were filed, but the site's location remained classified. Blanche of Bourbon was never made public. Her final tomb was left unmarked, as she had wished, a queen of 2 kingdoms, belonging to neither. The rose returns months later. Lucia Serrano stood before a museum exhibit in Paris, a collection of royal relics from medieval France. Among them, behind glass, was a fragment of silk, pale white, threaded with silver. The plaque read, "Origin unknown, presumed 14th century." Lucia smiled faintly. She recognized it. It was Blanche's veil, the one found in the empty tomb of Valladolid. She leaned closer. The air smelled faintly of roses, and in the reflection of the glass, for a brief, impossible second, she saw a woman standing beside her, in white, serene, crowned with thorns and light. The figure turned, looked directly into her eyes, and whispered, "History remembers now." When Lucia blinked, the reflection was gone. But one rose petal rested on the floor beneath the display, fresh, dewed, as if just placed there. Say, Epilogue, the Queen's Legacy. Years later, A foundation restored the forgotten chapel in the Pyrenees. No one spoke of the tomb beneath, but every visitor noted the same thing: a faint scent of roses in the air, even in winter. Pilgrims leave white flowers at the altar. No plaque, no title, only a candle and a whisper. For the queen who forgave the world. Historians still debate her fate. Some insist Blanche of Bourbon died in captivity. Others claim she lived as a nun under a false name. But the truth lies not in records, nor in relics, but in silence itself. Because sometimes, the most powerful stories are those that refuse to be proven. The camera of time pans slowly away, over snow-covered mountains, over centuries of betrayal and remembrance. And somewhere, deep beneath the earth, a queen sleeps at last, no longer divided by politics or pain. Her roses have stopped blooming. Her footsteps have faded, but her name has finally been spoken again. And history, at last, remembers Blanche of Bourbon, the queen who vanished from her own funeral and returned only when the world was ready.